The summer of 2007, a year of many things. To say it was a disappointing summer would be a terrible understatement. It wasn't even the wrestling that was bad, rather everything that surrounded it. I was a kid at the time, so for the most part, I didn't think much about it. My worries weren't about Mr. Kennedy and the signature pharmacy scandal, rather it was about how Batista was going to respond to the Great Khali destroying Rey Mysterio's head. I was out there shilling for John Cena and Batista, and what did I know about the news? But looking back, yeah, controversy was all over the place. The public was ready to tear down pro wrestling amidst several terrible tragedies, and that got worse as the weeks went by. One day you'd hear that sensational Sherry passed away, and the next, the news is covering the Benoit tragedy. So right now, let's go back to the year of controversy, 2007. Around this point, pro wrestling was on the down low. I'm obviously speaking from a rating standpoint. Compared to the late 90s, wrestling just didn't interest people as much as it did. I will say though that as a kid, everybody I knew, whether it be from school or a neighborhood friend, watched wrestling. You'd always hear somebody talk about Rey Mysterio, Randy Orton, John Cena, the Ruthless Aggression guys. WWE in particular was in a much positive position compared to 2002 to 2004. They found their guys and ran with them. TNA and ROH were gaining popularity slowly, and Impact in particular was signing some huge talents such as Kurt Angle, Samoa Joe, and when you look at it from that time period, there was a sense of optimism with the way things were going. The in-ring product for those two were must watch. And as I said, the landscape, the atmosphere looked cool, but then controversy came calling. Bam Bam Bigelow and Mike Awesome passed away within 1 month of each other in early 2007. Bam Bam was 45 and Awesome was 42, and it went from bad to worse as Bad News Brown and Ernie Ladd passed away within the same week in March of 2007. Then in June, Sherry Martel passed away from a drug overdose similar to Bam Bam Bigelow. Mike Awesome committed suicide at a young age, but all of these deaths were unfortunately overlooked about a week and a half later, because Chris Benoit was reportedly unable to make it to the Vengeance Night of Champions pay-per-view in Houston. This was because of carbon monoxide, according to Benoit himself, and as a result of this, his match with CM Punk was cancelled, and instead Johnny Nitro took his place and captured the ECW Championship. During the original broadcasting, the fans loudly chanted for Benoit's name in light of his absence, and this was removed from future airings on DVDs and the network. As for Benoit's whereabouts, he failed to contact anybody from the company, leading to a police search, and then from out of nowhere, it was reported that Chris Benoit, his wife Nancy, and their son Daniel died. So sudden, people were wondering what was going on. Why did they pass away? Many believed it could have been related to carbon monoxide. Confusion was in the air, and everyone was just so stunned. This was revealed only 4 hours before the special Raw episode in tribute to Mr. McMahon. Instead of having an on-air tribute show, that was canceled, and instead a highlight show in honor of Chris Benoit aired. Now, personally, I remember this episode and just seeing the likes of Edge shed tears. They had on a bunch of Benoit's greatest matches. From my memory, I recall they had the Royal Rumble match, WrestleMania 20, and I just cringe thinking about the tributes, because these were the final moments where everyone held Benoit in high regard. Me personally, I had Benoit's toy. It was the first wrestling toy I ever bought. It was well liked by me, and he wasn't my favorite wrestler or anything like that, but he was a babyface, so I obviously cheered him. So looking back, yeah, it's odd that this man would do something, but I'm not going to over-exaggerate and make a story out of it, because I remember that summer well, and after this week ended, I didn't really think much about this incident because I was young. Now, if it happened later on, that'd be a different story, but here, as I said, it was on to John Cena and Bobby Lashley, Edge and Kane, or whatever was going on at the time. But with that said, the true story was revealed later that night. Many also speculate that WWE had an idea near the end of the show as well. It was being investigated as a murder-suicide during Raw. Hell, William Regal during the tribute show didn't really praise Benoit for anything that didn't relate to the squared circle. In light of this, Mr. McMahon had one of the angriest looks on his face the next night on ECW. He addressed what had become apparent and promised that Mr. Benoit's name will not be mentioned, and that the show will be dedicated to everyone who was affected by this. So WWE brought John Cena to ECW and had him face Johnny Nitro in the opener. SmackDown also featured a bunch of Raw talent as well, and as for Chris Benoit, the news poured out over the next couple of weeks. Wrestlers were invited to many news broadcasts and were asked about this horrific tragedy, and they really tried to correct the anchors about many things. There was a bunch of questions coming from a bunch of people. Why are wrestlers dying young? Steroid this, steroid that, roid rage, a bunch of things. Vince himself was on the news talking about how all they're doing is speculating about the steroid thing. Kevin Nash embarrassed them on Fox News, and he was very logical and composed with his arguments, but the problem is they didn't want to hear it. And they were desperate to get the answer they wanted, and after Nash showed them that he ain't going to say what they want to say, they basically cut him off.
Have you ever taken steroids? I'm asking you, have you ever taken steroids? I've taken them and I haven't seen it.
All right, so we thank you very much for...
Turns out Benoit's brain was being so badly, and this of course stemmed from unprotected chair shots, headbutts. There's even that quote that he had an 87-year-old brain with Alzheimer. It's not outright believed that steroids didn't play a part. His body contained 10 times a regular level of testosterone, Xanax, and painkillers, CTE. It's a bunch of things, and I'm not going to talk like I know what's up. From one side, you hear Benoit's paranoid. He was a very odd character. If he liked you, it would be buddy-buddy, but if you were the other side, well, that's a different story. This man used to force Lundrick to eat steamed steak, 2 gallons of water, half a gallon of milk, and 16 eggs. And as a result of all of this that had went on in the past few weeks, Benoit's name was never mentioned again. He was removed from any upcoming DVDs, promotional items, t-shirts from WWE shop, toys. Nancy Benoit's legacy is not mentioned much due to her association with Chris, and this is despite the fact that she had a storied career. It ain't no exaggeration or fake outcry. Go look at the proof from ECW and WCW. And of course, Chris Benoit was removed from SmackDown vs. Raw 2008. Basically, Chris Benoit is a lesson. His drive and passion for pro wrestling ultimately played a part in his downfall. Harley Race even admitted that he regret inventing the diving headbutt because of the damage it caused himself and others. That's not to say somebody else wouldn't have invented it, but it's the thought that counts. It was shocking that he mentioned Hurricane Katrina, but the crowd was absolutely stunned by that reference as it was only a few weeks after the tragedy. But even though this was the worst of the summer, it had yet to conclude. Bryan Adams, also known as Crush, unfortunately passed away on August 13, 2007. His death was as a result of mixing prescribed medications, and he was only 43 years old. WWE at the same time had an ongoing investigation, and this had been brewing for a while with Eddie Guerrero's death opening the door. The policy had been enforced after Eddie's death, but some people were like, oh, what the hell is this wellness policy? It's nothing. Sure, guys were getting suspended, but after what was revealed in 2007, it had become a belief to some that the wellness policy was just there. It wasn't serious. What I'm about to talk about obviously relates to the wellness policy. In February of 2007, Sports Illustrated began investigating a potential steroid distributing network in Florida. A bunch of notable names in the sporting world were featured. Soon enough, though, wrestling ended up being involved, and the first name to be revealed was Kurt Angle. Upon being informed of this news, Angle was fuming and said, I did not improperly receive prescriptions. It is well documented that in my career, I have broken vertebrae in my neck on 5 occasions, and each time the course of treatment was under the care and supervision of my doctor. Any attempt to link me to the athletes in the current news account who may have improperly sought performance-enhancing drugs is without foundation. Angle's inclusion on the list was only the beginning because the floodgates opened. On March 19, 2007, Sports Illustrated released an article that claimed several wrestlers were tied to the drug ring. An Arizona doctor by the name of David Wilbert had written multiple prescriptions in between the months of November of 2004 to April of 2005. This relates to a number of wrestlers including Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio, Randy Orton, Edge, and The Hurricane. Oddly enough, these were only 6 of the 11 names. WWE released a statement the next day in light of the media reporting this. As a result of this huge revelation, Edge responded to this claiming that he did indeed use steroids after he returned from injury, as it would, quote, help the bones grow back around the screws and plates that were now inserted in my neck. Edge went on to express remorse over taking steroids and acknowledged his wrongdoings. WWE ended up testing over 20 wrestlers later that week, and the whole situation itself would cool down for a bit, but from out of nowhere, Chris Benoit was all over the news, and it was revealed that he was a customer of a company called MedX Life and Signature Pharmacy, filed the orders. This was in light of MedX Life's owners admitting that they helped customers receive prescription drugs without any medical needs. Then Benoit's personal doctor was arrested for giving out prescriptions, and some of the names revealed from the medical records were Lex Luger, Buff Bagwell, Johnny Grunge, Hardcore Holly, Mark Jindrak, Rey Mysterio, and Chris Benoit. The doctor's attorney, though, claimed Benoit was never prescribed anything illegal. To make matters worse for the situation in general, Congress got involved and asked WWE for information/records relating to the wellness policy, and so they sent them these records that dated back to September of 1998. A few weeks later, they asked TNA Wrestling the same thing, and they were investigating the use of these illegal drugs and steroids in the world of professional wrestling. Making media appearances at the time, Rey Mysterio denied using steroids from Benoit's doctor and claimed that he was there for pain medications. And Mr. Kennedy, well, this is another story. He spoke to The Sun in August of 2007 and said, I don't take steroids, but I have taken steroids in the past. I never took a lot, but when I was working the Independency and I was trying everything I could, I never took massive amounts of steroids, and do you know why I stopped taking them? Because of the wellness policy. Because I knew that having a job with the WWE was way more important than the 10 pounds of extra muscle that the steroids gave me. In another interview with Fox News, Mr. Kennedy was asked if he used steroids. Point blank, he responded no, and this is how it went.
You don't take steroids?
No.
This ended up affecting him in a big way because he was set to receive a huge push being the illegitimate son of Mr. McMahon. It was supposed to be some big-ass storyline, but that wasn't to be. On August 30th, 2007, the New York Daily News revealed a list of wrestlers who received steroids and drugs from internet doctors. 12 men on this list were current wrestlers signed with WWE, and they were Chavo Guerrero, Shane Helms, Randy Orton, John Morrison, Mr. Kennedy, Funaki, Charlie Haas, Umaga, William Regal, Edge, Sylvan, Ryan Adams, who wasn't under WWE contract, Chris Benoit, and Eddie Guerrero. Oh, and there was also Booker T and Chris Masters, who was added a while later, with Batista initially being on the list, but after it had become apparent that he wasn't a client of Signature Pharmacy, was removed. As a result of these names being revealed, they were suspended for violating the wellness policy, and in Simon Dean's case, fired. Multiple reports at the time also claimed that he already had heat and this was the last straw. The suspensions greatly affected the storylines on TV, as Umaga lost the Intercontinental Championship to Jeff Hardy, William Regal was written out after taking a beating, John Morrison lost the ECW Championship to CM Punk, Chavo took a grueling beating from Rey Mysterio, and in other places, another Florida doctor was illegally supplying growth-enhancing drugs, and Billy Kidman, who was a client, claims that he was referred to by Bryan Adams. Men who crossed paths with the doctor's clinic include Hector Guerrero, Eddie Guerrero, Dan Spivey, and The Big Show. This wasn't really a big deal, and it wasn't picked up by anybody. But back to Signature Pharmacy. Booker T was rumored to have been the only person who was suspended for 60 days, and this was in light of his second violation of the wellness policy, and as a result of this, quit WWE. In November of 2007, Chris Masters once again was suspended and released on November 6, 2007. D.H. Smith was suspended as well, and the steroid investigation as a whole was very awkward for WWE. TNA wasn't affected much by it, and the effects that these controversies took on the wrestling world was huge. As I said, everyone wanted to tear down wrestling, and it was almost disastrous. Some, not a lot, actually believed wrestling was going to fall off. Not like zero viewer fall off, but a significant amount. And there were a bunch of people that actually stopped watching after the Benoit tragedy. It was a lot of heat on the industry, but after the summer, it cooled down. There was some rumblings like Cena taking something. Rather than that, the news focused on other things, and wrestling was back to being wrestling, although some didn't see it the same way after that summer. This caused WWE to undergo a change in the product. They were TV-14, but after the summer, you can notice some small changes, such as featuring Hornswoggle in these TVG-type segments where Carlito would run into a wall or whatever. Blood was still around, but not for long, and after going HD, WWE turned PG. This, of course, had to do with what had occurred in 2007. Add to that, there's more money with a family-friendly product. There was more sponsorships, which wouldn't occur if you had JBL dragging Chris Jericho with the bull rope, or Kelly having her expose. There's other reasons for the changes, of course, but the summer of 2007 caused the start. Chair shots to the head were slowly being phased out. It took a while, because in the early PG era, they were still swinging them to the face, and as a matter of fact, this continued until early 2010. Benoit's death led to more research into CTE. Wrestlers started protecting themselves more, and in a way, it was like the end of an era. A bunch of people look at WWE pre-Benoit, pre-Signature Pharmacy, and the era afterwards. So those were the big problems WWE had at the time. Another thing that was hurting them, although this was minor compared to the other problems, was the lack of star power. The summer itself was plagued with injuries and suspensions. At the top of the card, Edge, The Undertaker, Bobby Lashley, Triple H, Shawn Michaels, these guys were the biggest stars in the company, and the only main eventers featured were John Cena, Batista, Rey Mysterio, Randy Orton, and King Booker. That's literally it. And because of this, the Great Khali ended up becoming the world champion. The roster issues slowly resolved by the end of summer. While King Booker and Lashley ended up leaving, and John Cena actually got injured, HBK, The Undertaker, Triple H, Edge, and Chris Jericho were back. And I've said this multiple times, but Chris Jericho's return in November of 2007 felt like the beginning of a new year. Alright, that's it for this video. Make sure you hit the mic check on the like button, and perhaps the spear on the subscribe button. Peace, I'm out.